In previous videos in this series, we've looked at events and we introduced the idea of JavaScript and the document object model and where you place the JavaScript in the document. What I want to do in this one is just make a little practical example, show the kind of stuff that we can do now, bringing some of the techniques we've already seen together. And events as well is another one of the videos you should have a look at to support what's going on here. So basically what I'd like to do is I'd like to be able to click on these items here in this HTML document. These are just in this index page here, so they are just span tags, red, green, blue, so the col picker class there in my style sheet is just to give it the dotted outlines. It's in there somewhere, there you go, that's just a dotted border, and then what I'd like to do is to, when I click on these, change the colour to red, green, blue, etc. So you'll notice I've added classes in there of red, green, blue and a reset so that we know which button we've clicked on. We'll see how we do that in a second in the JavaScript. And what I've also got set up as well as in the style sheet, there are a series of classes here, red back, green back, blue back, with different background colours associated with them. So basically what I want the JavaScript to do is when I click on one of these, I want to be able to add to the body tag here a class, say, of red back. So I'll just hard code that in for now, and you'll see that that will change the background colour. Now I've just hard coded that. What we want to happen is that we want the JavaScript to make that happen automatically. So I'll just reset it. So what we're going to need is an event. So this first one, red, is a span tag here of class red. So what I could do in my JavaScript file, some code from the previous examples in there. So what I could do is I could say document.query selector. So document.query selector looks in the DOM and it's going to look for a DOM element, HTML element if you like, by a CSS selector, and we know that that has a class of red. So in here we could use a CSS selector of dot, because it's a class selector in CSS, red, and that would select that item. And then, as we saw in a previous movie, we could then say dots, and we could use the add event listener to attach an event to this red button. So the add event listener takes two parameters, the type of event first of all, there's a string, so we'll say that's a click, and then the second is a function which is known as the event handler. This is the function that's going to be triggered when we click on that red button. So I'll type in function, put in a pair of empty parentheses and then a curly brace. I'll just hit return, so that what we've got there is an entire function going in as the second parameter of the add event listener method. So let me just do a console.info, so I'll say hello red, so we know that red was pressed. Right, so let's go back to my browser, right click and inspect, bring up the console, there's the console. So we don't need a mobile view, so when we click on red we get nothing, so maybe just refresh the page, let's try again. There we go, hello red, so we can see that that is getting picked up when we press it like so. Great, okay, so we've now got an event being triggered, so it's always handy to just put the console in just to check it's worked. Once it's done you can either comment that out or delete it, because what I want to then do is I want to say that document.query selector. So query selector, as we've seen, will look for a DOM element by HTML selector, and we just saw that what we want to happen is we want that body tag to be selected and to add a class to it. So we can just put in body. Now the reason why we can get away with that in both these instances is because there is only one class of red in this document and there's only one body in this document. What query selectors will do is it will look for the first match for that CSS selector. So in both these instances that works out quite nicely for us. So we'll target the body element and then we'll use the set attribute method that we saw in the previous movie. What this will do is you can use this to set a given any attribute with a particular value. You can assign it to the target, to what you've found in the DOM. So we found that body tag and we are going to set the class value of it like we did manually before. Set the class value of it to be sorry, that quote's come from somewhere. So the class value of it to be red back. So remember, red back in the style sheet was this class here that was set up to give a red background colour to our document. Great. Right, so let's try that. We'll go back to the browser, just refresh it. And now if we click on red, in fact, let's bring the console up and you'll look at the elements here. So there's the body tag. So when we click on it, you'll see it adds the class of red back to it. Obviously you get that red changed there. Okay, so now that sets the red. What you could then fairly easily do is you could add the other ones in. So we have green, blue, there's a reset, so you've got a green and a blue in there as well. So what we can do in here then is we could just replicate that. So we could say document.query selector, and this time we could find the green button, and then we could say add event listener, and we could then say click, comma, and then put a function in there or event handler, and we could then say document dot query selector body, and then we could set the attribute of the class to be the class of green back. Okay, because we have a green back class set up with a green colour that we then want to apply to the body. Let's try that. Let's go and refresh. So it sets it back to white, and now if we click on green, you see that class of green gets applied there. Right, and we could do the same for the blue as well, so let's just copy that. So we know we've got a class of blue, we know we've got a blue back, like so. So now we can be red, see it's changed the class there, we can be green, we can be blue, and then for default, well, a number of different ways that you could tackle default. So we have a reset class, so that's what we could use to register our event against. So we could say document.query selector reset dot add event listener, and click, and then put our event handler function in. And what we could then do is say document query selector body, so target the body again, and then now we could say set attribute, but what we can also do is there are you'll see there we've got remove attribute, so we could say remove attribute, so that's another method. So it's a verb, you've got verb, noun, remove attribute. It's going to do exactly what it says on the tin, and the attribute we want to remove is class. Okay, so that's going to take the class, which will either be blue, green or red, and remove it, and that'll set the page back to the default white colour. So let's see this in action. So there's our body tag. Click on red, red back, click on green, green back, click on blue, blue back, click on default, and it gets rid of that class. It sets the document back to the white default colour. Okay, now, as a seasoned programmer, if you're watching this, you might be thinking, oh dear, because this repetition is never particularly good. So what we could do is we could, what's known as refactor this. We could probably tackle this a slightly different, more sophisticated way. So if you're struggling with these concepts, you want to go over these again, it's a good point to stop here, because I'm going to take this a little bit further now with a slightly more advanced approach to what we've got there. So if you're still with us, I'm going to get rid of all of that, just comment it out, and let's get rid of it completely. So we're going to take a slightly different approach to what we had. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable, a var, that I'm going to call colour buttons. And I'm going to set this equal to document dot. Now we've seen query selector, but you notice there's a sister method called query selector all, and that's going to do as it says on the tin. It's going to select all of the elements that match a particular CSS selector. Because if I look at the HTML, you'll see that all of those have got the same class selector. These are, you can apply more than one class to an element, that's no problem, and all of these have got col, short for colour picker, because that was what applied the dotted line around the outside in the CSS. It gives us the hover effect when we roll over those buttons, like so. Not much hover going on there. Don't know where the hover's gone, but anyway, that's the, oh, it's the pointer, sorry. It's the pointer effect that we get it in there. I'll show you that again. See, as you roll over there, you get the pointer cursor. That's because these aren't actually links, so we have to force the issue with this hover class. So anyway, point being, these are all col picker. So what I'm going to do is put col picker in, whoops, in there. So dot col picker. So what does that actually give me? Let's have a look. So we'll do console.dir. So console.dir when you've got more complex elements to have a nosy at. I'll ask it to tell us what the colour buttons actually is. This is going to basically return all of the elements that match that CSS selector, and it returns them in a format known as a node list. So let's show you this. Just refresh. Go to our console, you can see we've got a node list that consists of 4 elements, because we've got red, green, blue, default. So they are our 4 elements. We expand that out, we can see there they all are. So all 4 of them now are in this node list, which is an array-like structure. Notice it's got a property there of length, so we know how long the node list is. We know it's got 4 items inside of it. Now, because this is an array-like structure, what we can do is we can loop around it. So we could say for var I equals 0. So from 0, as long as I is less than colour buttons dot length. So that's the length of the, basically the number of items. That's the length of the node list. And then we'll say I plus plus. Plenty of other ways we can do this, but that's a fairly standard for loop. If you've used PHP, it's the same construct. So what we're going to place inside of here then is we'll then say colour buttons, and then use square brackets to access each of the different items within that node list, so which is like an array. And then we could say add event listener, and we could say click. And then we could, rather than putting in an anonymous function, I'm going to create a function here called change colour. So I'll create that in a second. Let's do that next. So down here we'll say function change colour. And let's first of all just put in a console. So clicked. Okay, so let's just recap. We've created a node list from all the matches of this CSS selector. So that's these 1, 2, 3, 4 items. We then loop around that because we can find out its length, and for each of the items that are in there we add a listener. We add a click event, and each one of those click events is going to call this change color function. Right, let's go back to the browser and refresh. So when I click on each one of these, you'll see it picks up the event. So the event is added automatically to all 4 of them by virtue of looping around them. Now, the clever thing about these functions that are called by an event listener, these functions are called event handlers because they get sent the event, and we can expose that by typing EV, whatever you choose to call it. So I choose to call it EV, short for event. We can expose that in the parentheses of the function. So let's change this down here. So it's now ev.target, and what you'll see there is that each time that is now going to become a different, there's red, there's green, there's blue, there's default. So we know which one's being clicked on by virtue of the fact that this function is past the event, and we can look at the target property of the event to find out which one it was. Because what we want to do is extract whether it's red, green or blue, because that's obviously going to dictate which colour we then use. Now, there is also, handily enough, there is something called a class list property. And a class list, let's show you what that looks like. We'll call that. Let's go back and refresh. Right, so I'll go back and refresh. So we've got our event target class list. Let's show you what that will do. So we'll go over refresh, and we've still got this node list, but when I peel that open, there's a span of class red, colour picker green, colour picker blue, colour picker reset, colour picker. So basically this represents, if you peel that open, you'll see that we've got inside of there all the different values, and there's green, okay. So what we're going to do is we'll take this event target, and it does actually have another property called class list. Now I'm going to change this to dir here, because again this gives a slightly more complex object, and we'll go refresh. So we've got this, let's click on one of these. So we've now got this thing here, and this is basically gives me all of the values. There's the classes there, the red and the colour picker. You see red is in slot 0, colour picker is in slot 1. I looked at green, there's my token list again of green is in 0, colour picker in 1. So if I change that to 0, excuse me, it will now, when I click on these, it picks up red, green, blue, reset. Okay, so that's now represents the first class of red, green, blue, reset of the two classes that's in the class list. So class list is basically a list of all the classes associated with that DOM element. So now what we can then do is, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable called color picked, and I'll set it equal to ev.target.classList0, so get that name, and then we'll add to it back, because remember when we did this the first time we wanted to use red back, green back, blue back as the names of our classes to apply to the body. Then I'll create a variable called body element, just to make life a little bit easier, and we'll set that equal to document.querySelector, and we'll pick up the body like we did in the earlier example, and then we'll say body element dot set attribute of class, and set it to color picked. Okay, so instead of having that big list of events, we are now going to work out which one we clicked on. We're going to build a color picked class based on the color that we chose, and then we're going to use that as the color picked value to set to the class. So let's give that a whirl. There's red, there's green, show you there, there's green, red, green, blue, default, sets it to reset back, which kind of works because there is no class called reset back, so it sets it to be white. But I guess what we could do, just to be ultra pedantic here, we could say if color picked equals reset back, then if that's the case, we will say body element dot remove attribute of class, else we shall use that value down here. So if it is, reset back or remove it, else or use it. Just slightly tidy it. If we go red, green, blue, and this will remove that completely, like so. Blue, green, red. Okay, so that's a slightly more advanced technique, and it introduces query select all. Query select it all returns all the matches for that CSS selector, and you then have to handle them in some way, so usually through some kind of loop, so you can work out which one you've clicked on. And the beauty of this is it should be more, it should be easier to extend, because all I would need to do is, let's see, say my style sheet, I created a new one called yellow back, and we say background colour is yellow. So there's my new class, and then in here I then went and created a new button. I'll just copy one of those existing ones, and we say that that is yellow, and obviously change that to be yellow. Save that. I'm not going to have to touch the JavaScript code because of the way that we've abstracted away any kind of hard-coded values in there. So that, if I just refresh, there's my new yellow button, and you see that works just the same as the others, so I could easily add other colours in without having to touch the code. So good programmers avoid hard coding stuff, and that's what I've hopefully tried to achieve there. Okay, thank you very much.